Alright, new video. I'm here with my bike at Lamborghini. The reason for that is because I wanted to talk about the new Ferrari that was introduced last night, the Ferrari Luce. So, as you all have probably seen by now, the design is quite controversial. And I think here at Lamborghini we're gonna see how you can do something like an SUV with 5 seats, but it looks better and it still has Lamborghini DNA inside, even though it's not a Lamborghini at heart. It's an Audi underneath, but still I think everybody would choose this over the Ferrari Luce. So yeah, last night I saw the video of them introducing the Ferrari Luce and I thought to myself, what the F? And there's many reasons for that. So for one, there's the design. I mean, this is a 5-seater sports SUV from an Italian manufacturer. And, you know, it got some hate when it came out, but I mean, it's not bad looking. It never was bad looking in my opinion. And it might be slightly controversial if you consider Lamborghini only building sports cars until like 15 years ago. And then they started to, or even 10 years ago, and then they started to slowly, you know, go into the SUV market, and now they're also considering, you know, building other things. So up until like 10 years ago, we only had sports cars like this. But yeah, so I think there's multiple reasons for what Ferrari is doing. But you have to ask yourself, at what point does the manufacturer go too far? And I think they went too far with this one. First, the design is obviously terrible. You cannot really argue about that. Secondly, the price of north of $600,000 US, which is absolutely insane for any electric car, but especially for an electric car from Ferrari that looks like absolute garbage. I mean, I'm not sure what new price of an Urus is, but it's definitely not 600,000. I mean, you cannot argue that this car looks worse than the Luce. Yeah, it's not a Ferrari, but I mean, you know, the Luce is not really a Ferrari either, so you can't argue about that. And I think one of the main problems is Ferrari is trying to sell models. You know, they're looking at the stock and trying to increase sales, and they have to build cars that sell. That's why they built the Roma, that's why they built the Portofino, that's why they built the 296 GTB. Because these are cars that are just there to be sold, but they're not really for the purest Ferrari fans. And you can argue, you know, the Roma, like, it's still got a V8, it still looks alright, you know, but it's not the best looking. But I feel like the design has gotten worse in the last 5 years. And there is this program from Ferrari where you can essentially buy a car, and the more cars you buy, the further up you get in their system, and you can like collect points, and at some point you can basically win an entry to be able to buy one of their supercars, like the LaFerrari or the SP1 or SP2. But you have to buy a whole bunch of other Ferrari cars before that. So their idea was to build the Luce as one of those cars that people are going to buy, further develop in their program, so they can enter the lottery basically to get the ability to drive one of those cars. But I think this car is not going to sell, and I think the stock market has spoken this morning, because the stock went down like 8% in one day, which is, for a value stock, quite insane. Another issue is that Ferrari was trying to solve a problem with the Luce that nobody had. If you think about it, who is going to buy this car? If you want an SUV from Ferrari, you can simply go and buy the Purosangue. If you want an electric car with 1,000 horsepower, you go and buy a Model S Plaid from Tesla. If you want any ugly design vehicle, you go to wherever. You buy a Honda, you buy a Toyota, whatever. You know, to me, the Luce looks like a mix of a Toyota Prius and some kind of Honda, or maybe a Leaf. And to say that of a Ferrari is a statement itself, because if you start comparing Ferraris to Hondas more than you start comparing them to, let's say, a Lamborghini or a Pagani, then you know there's something wrong. And I think we all know that Ferrari is going through some identity crisis, just as other brands, such as this vehicle right here, which is another perfect example of how a brand can mess up their reputation, because, you know, it takes decades to build a legacy, but only one car to destroy it. And I think this is what Ferrari has done with this car. I think now you can compare the Luce to like a Cybertruck, or maybe a Jaguar I-Pace, which is kind of sad because this is not who Ferraris should be compared with, but unfortunately this is the position where they have put themselves into. And you know, the Cybertruck had a very controversial design as well when it came out, but if you look at it as a vehicle and not a car, you can say it's all right. You know, it works for what it is. And you got to consider that Tesla is also a very forward-thinking company who stood for innovation from the beginning. You know, they built their success upon electric cars. So the Cybertruck wasn't really a new thing to them, it was just a new thing to the market. But Ferrari has a different value, Ferrari has a different history. So if they do what Tesla does with the Cybertruck, it is a whole different story. And you know, people might argue, yeah, but the car is gonna grow on us, it's gonna be pretty in 5 years. Well, look at the Jaguar I-Pace. I think this is the closest car in terms of design that comes to like close to the Luce. And if you look at the Jaguar I-Pace, it's still not a pretty car. And I don't think that the Ferrari this time is gonna grow on us because it's simply not beautiful. Ferrari was probably thinking, you know, there's a huge market for a car like this, for a 5-seater electric Ferrari. But where exactly should that market be? Because in Europe, purists want a Ferrari with a V8 or a V12 that sounds nice, that looks good, that has emotion, because that's the 3 things that Ferrari stands for. But none of that is being delivered by the Luce, and you don't even notice that the Luce is a Ferrari if the badge wasn't there. So the only reason to tell it's a Ferrari is by looking at the badge, which is a statement in itself, and it's not a good one. You could say, okay, what about Dubai? The problem about Dubai is that people there want exclusive, extreme cars. They want the cars to be loud. They want the cars to be extravagant. That's why they build Novitec kits on their Ferraris. That's why they buy a G63 from Brabus and not a stock G63. That's why they build wide body Aventadors, because they want the even more extreme version of what's already extreme. The Luce is none of that. And you can't even tune it because there's no engine. So it's just the way it is from Ferrari, from factory. No Novitec, no wide bodies. It's just there, the way it is. And then you could talk about China and say, okay, China is one of the largest economies in the world, and they have a very high percentage of electric cars driving around. It's the biggest EV market in the world. The problem is the Chinese market is extremely oversaturated. There's over 100 car companies that build electric cars in China alone. And they build good cars because they built them from the get-go. They have years of experience. And Chinese people simply, you know, if they want a sports car, of course they buy a Ferrari. But if Ferrari builds an electric car, which is basically their specialty, then why would they buy a car north of $500,000 if they can buy the same thing that's even better for less than half of the price of a Chinese company? I think it's kind of crazy that Ferrari had at least 10 to 12 years now to build an electric car. And this is the design they came up with. This is all they got in 10 years of designing. Because Ferrari hasn't used electric power plants since yesterday. They have been doing that for over a decade. They started with the LaFerrari, which is a hybrid if you didn't know. So they had batteries in cars 12 years ago. I think the LaFerrari was introduced in 2013, so 13 years ago. So you would say such a big company, such a big brand, with such a big team can come up with something better than whatever that is that they introduced to us last night. And looking at the stock, another thing that you're realizing is that, usually when a company focuses too much on the stocks, they disappoint the customers. Or when they focus too much on the customers, they disappoint investors. It's either one of the two. But Ferrari managed to scare off both of them. And I think there's nothing wrong with Ferrari building an electric car. There is beautiful electric cars like the Honda E or the Taycan Cross Turismo. They don't look bad, and I think it's fair to say that Ferrari can have an electric car, but it's a matter of how you do it. And after all that time, they could have done something better. It's like Ferrari building this electric car is as if Heckler & Koch would start to build like vegan products, vegan alternatives for meat. It's just not what the company stands for. And now everybody has lost their trust in the company because they don't know what is Ferrari going to release next. Is it going to be beautiful? Is it going to sell? You don't know. Back in the day, Ferrari released a new car and they were turning heads. Now they're turning stomachs. And I think with that being said, I'm gonna end this video. We'll see what the future brings. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you soon.